I know you've been waiting for this, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Registration is officially open for the next class of FAMM. The Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program teaches you to use the menstrual cycle as a diagnostic tool in your women's health practice. Whether you're a women's health professional with a busy practice or you're in the midst of a professional training program, FAMM is what you've been waiting for. By the time you finish your FAMM certification, you'll have the skills to confidently teach fertility awareness to your clients, interpret all kinds of complex charting scenarios, and you'll have the step-by-step protocols you need to help your clients improve their hormone and menstrual cycle health. Classes are starting toward the end of October, and early bird registration is open until October 14th. Apply today at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 544. Today, I'm sharing another brand new episode in my FAMM Practitioner series. I'm sharing my interview with Chloe Van Lente. We recorded this episode in the final months of our FAMM program together. And what's interesting about today's episode is that Chloe actually has a background in fertility awareness before she joined our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. She was a previous graduate of the Grace of the Moon program, now the Well. And throughout the series, I've really enjoyed hearing more about how our practitioners discovered fertility awareness, the impact it's made on their lives and in their practices. And before we jump into today's episode, I want to share a little bit about Chloe. Chloe Van Lente is a holistic arts practitioner who specializes in women and infant wellness. Through specialized bodywork, movement, and body-based education, she helps people feel confident and informed about what actually happens in the body through all phases of womanhood naturally. She lives in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in the United States and works both online and in person in her private healing arts center. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode with Chloe. And I'm really excited to be here today with Chloe. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Well, we were just chatting a little bit in the pre-chat. Anyone who's listened to the podcast for a while knows that these are some of my favorite episodes. I love having the opportunity to chat with our FAMM practitioners. And at the time that we're recording this, I still can't believe that we're almost towards the end of the program because it really does feel like it flew. I feel like we started just a couple of months ago, but no, it was like 8.5. So it's kind of crazy. But yeah, so with that said, really excited to chat with you today, get a little bit deeper into your own story. And so I'd love to start with one of my favorite questions, which is, how old were you when you had your first period? And take us through what led you to jump into fertility awareness charting, and of course, what led you to jump into the FAMM program as well at this time.
Yeah, so I started my first period when I was 10 years old. It had been my birthday wish for 2 years because I lived in a really small town where our grades were combined, and my older friends had started to get theirs, and I always wanted to be older. So I was really, really excited to do it. And I remember starting at my aunt's house and also being really scared to tell anyone because my mom wasn't there. But then when everyone came back, them being like, really kind of mocking about it, of like, oh, my period cramps out, and having no idea what they were saying. And I was a ballerina growing up as well. So I don't remember the first few years being hard, but when I got into my teens, I had really bad migraines around my period. And eventually they got to be really bad cramps going into college when I was on a college diet and poor and couldn't afford nutrition. So that was the start of that. I started charting. Well, actually, the first time I had heard anything about tracking was actually when I was a senior in high school. I read a Tom Robbins book, Still Life with Woodpecker, and they mentioned just using the full moon as something, which was the only reference I had ever heard anyone say about doing anything with their periods or timing. So that was the intro. But it wasn't until I was actually already my abdominal therapy practitioner, and I started seeing people for painful periods as a massage therapist. And eventually people started coming in for fertility issues too. And I remember someone saying that they had a short luteal phase and having no idea what it was. So as I'm taking notes about them, writing Google short luteal phase later to see. And from there, it led me to the taking charge of your fertility book. And when I got it, I read the whole thing in like a night. And it's like a hefty 500 page whatever, but I like gobbled it up. So immediately looked into taking a training. Actually, I had already taken a fertility awareness training back in 2016, 2017. That was a 2-year program and loved it. But life happened, the pandemic happened, and I had a really hard time integrating it in sustainably. So it would just be really sporadic because my primary job is a body worker, but also I was just super burnt out. So when I saw that you were offering this class again, I was just so excited to kind of get revitalized and excited about things again, and it worked. So
hmm Well, thank you for taking us through that. I find it so interesting to discover how each of our practitioners have found FAMM. I find it just to be so interesting to look back. And I also found it interesting when you said that you had your first period at 10, but that you were excited for it. I've spoken to many women who had their period around that age, and you're the first who was actually ready and prepared. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and why your experience of that was so different? I mean, I think when I was 10, I didn't even know it. I would have been like the other, like at that particular age, because I remember my first friend got her period, I think when I was in the maybe third or fourth grade. And I remember she said something about like, she was like maybe 1 year older, which seems like a lot older when you're young. And I remember she said something about pads, and I was like, what, like to write, on it. And then she was like, no, 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 like my period. And I was like, I knew what it was. I knew what she meant, but I was kind of like, oh my gosh, that's a thing, right? Because we were so young.
yeah, and you know what's funny too about that, just hearing your experience, is my parents were divorced and lived in different cities, so they lived about 3 hours apart. And I remember finding my mom's old pads like underneath the bathroom sink and being like, "What are these for?" And my dad is truly like in the people that I knew at the time, the most educated on all things body. He was like he had a master's in kinesiology, wanted to be a chiropractor, was like excellent with nutrition and chemistry, and explained it to me. And I just remember like wanting to die inside and being like, oh, I don't want to talk to you about any of this. And I was pretty young at that point. But then, even when I lived with my mom over in the on Mackinac Island, no one was very like women powered or like female bodies are awesome by any means. And I think, again, I think it was just having older friends and want I was the only person, or there was 2 other people in my grade. And since I hung out with the older kids, I just wanted to be older so bad that as soon as I had like any shot of like seeming or appearing older, I was like, yes. And I said that 2 of my birthday wishes were I was starting my period, but I also wished for like a C cup and a D cup. I mean, I was really like, I cannot wait to be this female body someday.
Oh, I love that. That's really cool. It just shows I guess, the variety of everyone's experience. I can certainly resonate with that, but I had to wait a lot longer. So I had to wait until I was around 13-ish, maybe on the cusp of 14. So I also wanted a C cup or a tea cup. So I resonate with that as well.
Did it happen? It didn't happen for me.
I feel like I was like a strong B for a really long time. And then after having kids, I've morphed into more of a C. So TMI for everybody who did not need that information, but now has it.
When I was pregnant, I was finally like a D cup, and then I was like, oh, but no one can care. So
yeah. Yeah. Nothing like the milk coming in to bring in the D's. But no, that's really interesting. And it sounds like your experience with menstruation, it kind of fluctuated. At first maybe it was kind of like a non-thing, and then it changed. And you mentioned your college diet. I think maybe a lot of us wouldn't even think to attribute that to particularly difficult periods at that time. And you mentioned not Tony, of course, I put that in because of course I did. Tom Robbins' book. That was really interesting as well, because it wasn't a direct reference, but it was the thing that kind of like made you think about cycles, which I think is really interesting. So share a little bit then about you did talk a little bit about your experience with Maya abdominal therapy. And yeah, I just want to hear a little bit more about that, and also about the training that you had. And yeah, just tell us a little bit more about that.
yeah, so I got into my abdominal therapy. I mean, this was like the internet was around, but it wasn't like everything wasn't so available. So I had already had my first baby, and I I think it was in a Midwifery Today magazine where there was like a very, very small advertisement in this magazine saying that there would be a training and it helped with painful periods. And I had heard other people say that after you have a baby, your periods would get better. And mine were not that way. Mine got significantly worse. And I remember getting my first period after having my son and having this like full body PTSD of like, oh my God, I'm in labor again. This is awful.
Wow.
So I found out that this thing existed and then totally fell in love. The first initial class that you took at the time was a self-care course. And it's not that I didn't have the greatest results, but it was like a day class. A practitioner did a really quick session. And I remember being so shy about showing my abdomen because I had struggled with eating disorders in the past. I had a bunch of emotional experiences and just being like, oh, I actually can't breathe. And I felt like it wasn't a great experience, but I was like, but if I could help other people. So it wasn't like a self thing. It was like, but I could help others. So I'll keep doing it. And then when I went to the professional training, which was a roughly like a 5 or 6 day training at the time, that was when I got really connected to the other students and felt really secure and safe in my body and had a really wonderful experience with that. And so besides the sisterhood of that course, what I really loved was the next time I had a period, I started like, I'm going to say like quote unquote accidentally, because I didn't have raging PMS for the first time and I didn't have any pain or symptoms leading up. I just started my period somewhere and was like, this hasn't happened in years. So it was really a wonderful experience. And then it still is a major foundation of my practice now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I just really appreciate the explanation of that. It's really interesting how even though you didn't necessarily see immediate benefit, you still saw that others could, and then eventually you did. That's really interesting.
And it's been something that I've carried out throughout my practice now too, where for the first 5 years of doing it, I started that in 2013. So it's 2024. It's been a minute since I've started that.
Yeah.
But so for the first like 4 or 5 years of doing abdominal work, I'd start out like they showed us too. I'd start out with the abdominal massage and people would be like, you can go deeper, or they'd be horrified. And I'd be like, you're not letting me in. And it'd take like the whole hour to make any progress. But I implement another strategy now first, which is way gentler and easier. And I make sure that I connect with people a lot more so that then when I do the abdominal massage, it's easy and they have no idea that they would have ever fought me on it. But I try to like really build up that connection first so everyone feels a little bit more supported.
Mm-hmm. It's truly incredible if you think about what a few years of practice will do in terms of just building your skills, your confidence. And what you said is really key there, because it's just you're creating the environment. You had a strategy to kind of build trust and ensure the clients are relaxed so that you can then do what you needed to do in the first place. But if you started there, it wouldn't necessarily be as efficient, or even some people wouldn't even let you do it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's pretty amazing to see people being like, wow, I'm really trying to relax, or like their brain can trust me, but their body is a whole other story. So seeing that brain body connection in real life has just been a wonderful experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely have not had the experience of the physical body work because it's not part of what I do. But I do find that I have strategies that it feels like it's natural after you've done it for so long, right? So sometimes I question the word like natural, because it's like, is it, or is it just that I've done this for so long that, you know what I mean? But I feel like I often try to create that environment with just a variety of different things. Like obviously having the podcast, anyone who listens to it for a long time hears a lot of my voice. It gets to know me, and you could probably attest that I'm pretty much the same all the time. so, so it's kind of like it's a strange phenomenon, because you kind of feel like you know somebody, although you've never really met them. So that kind of sets the stage, and then the way that you interact with clients. So this is just me kind of going on a little bit of an interesting tangent, but some of the like not so great feedback about the podcast, be like, what's with her weird laughter? Like, why does she laugh all the time? But I find that, like, first of all, like, I don't know, deal with it. So I don't know what to say. But the other thing is that I think that's one of the ways that I have naturally broken down those walls and tried to help. Like, it's not something I consciously do. I don't feel like I consciously do it, but being kind of humorous and making jokes and taking the seriousness out of things. And I feel like it's part of one of the things that I have wound up doing. Like I said, I don't know that it's intentional, but I'm aware of it now. So I didn't like intentionally start doing any type of thing that way, but I'm aware now that that's something that helps people to feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think laughter always sort of takes the risk out of scenarios. So especially, I mean, you cover such a wide range of topics in your podcast, and I love what like the female body and women's health and all the things that can happen. But I'm sure a lot of people found your podcast by Googling symptoms or something of like, what's wrong with me? What's happening? So if you could add any sorts of humor to that, I think that's amazing. And I do want to say, just because you made that comment, I think you hold a wonderful container. Like you said, you are funny and you're also direct, and like you just do such a wonderful job at holding the space for us to all stay on track and go together versus having this like open, chaotic, swirly, all over the place thing.
Well, thank you for that. That's really nice feedback on it. I like when if you sit down and think about all the things that we've talked about in class, and for any of our podcast listeners who've listened for a while, any of the topics that we've broached on the podcast over the past 10 years, I keep like throwing that in because I'm still celebrating like the fact that it's been that long, and it's how old am I? How like that's wild. But there's a lot of really hard stuff that we talk about. A lot of stuff that is not just doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue. So it's really hard stuff. There's so many difficult experiences that our clients have gone through, so many really awful experiences that women have shared in the reality series over the years. And yeah, so I feel like you kind of, at least for me, in order to continue to just kind of sit with all of that, I think it's just my natural response to find the humor in it, find there's a lot of the stuff of the reality of some of the challenges and all of that, but what else can you do but just poke fun at it a little bit, even though it's not always fun. So anyways, I just thought of that parallel because I was like, how do I do that without touching people?
No, your experience is evident.
Yeah. Well, then I suppose one of the things that it's come up a lot, I think, this year. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's come up in my practice many times. And I know we've spoken about this in class, which is, don't be intimidated if you have a client that comes to you to learn charting if they've had experience. So, thinking about jumping into this program after having taken a full 2-year program, I think the natural question is like, what could you possibly learn, right? You've already learned it all. So maybe share a little bit about what your experience was for anyone who has those same questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first training that I took was also wonderful. It was a 2-year program, and truly the programs are so different. So that one, we met every Wednesday, and she had done a really great job at holding this container of like sisterhood and circle. So like I think there was 10 other girls in the program, and I knew what day of their cycle they were on all the time. And like, even as they were kind of talking like, oh, I don't know why this thing was happening. In my head, I'd be like, oh, well, remember you had that breakup last month. I wonder if.
Wow.
So, and we did a lot of our own research to present to our classmates as part of the lessons. And so at the time, I had been out of school for a little bit, and it kind of switched my brain into like, okay, this is how I look for this. I loved it. It was a lot of like some of the differences were like we use Kandara a lot, and then we group cervical mucus different than the Justice method, which you've shared with us. And so like I said, I could have gone with that forever and probably never taken a training and still helped people or like shed light on situations. But I didn't feel like I was so far removed from it that I had to join something else. It was just kind of like I needed more to support people at the time. And I really needed that passion and like reignition to kind of jump in. And I had noticed that I was getting into this rut with not a rut with a certain demographic of people of like culture or religion or anything, but there was a certain people that were seeking something that I was noticing frustrations coming up against, and I really needed some extra support around like how am I going to show up as a practitioner. And actually what really led to the training was I had 3 people reach out to me in the same week of, hey, do you still teach charting? And I hadn't at that point for a while. And I was like, okay, like the first time I was like, well, I could. And then the second time I was like, wow. And the third time I was like, okay, all right, universe, I heard you. And then honestly, I know this sounds nuts, but your email showed up out of nowhere, seemingly to my inbox, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I just kind of like followed the breadcrumbs of the trails. And what I really loved about your program was you had such a container of resources and support, and I really didn't want to reinvent the wheel again. I didn't want to come up with like, maybe I'll expand and come up with my own resources at some point, but I really needed a solid framework of someone to take me through to go, okay, I know this. And the best part about taking this training again is, or this training for the first time, but kind of building on it is it's not like starting over. I already have a foundation, and it's so nice to apply like experience with other clients and to really sandwich this on top and to just know more and to just know more tools and to the way that you teach is slightly different. Like the methods are slightly different. And I love that too, because now I get to think back on clients and think like, ah, this would have really helped them, or like, oh, I wonder if that was going on. So
Oh yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I really appreciate how you laid it out because I think as you get to a certain place in your professional development, I mean, in one area or another, if you're growing eventually and if your client base is growing, eventually you will hit the limitations of what you know in a certain area, one area or another. And so I'm a firm believer, of course, in professional development. And I'm always doing a variety of different professional development opportunities within the field itself, but also within the business field, as we've talked a little bit about. So there's always areas, and in order to stay current and maybe your clients start asking for different things, and it's when that kind of stuff happens when you realize, oh wow, I actually don't know how to answer the question, or oh wow, I actually don't know how to help you with that. That's where I feel like the professional development piece comes in. So it's really helpful to hear how you were able to build on what you had learned before and learn a few new things. And I feel like I'm always excited to see what our practitioners are going to do with this information, because then you're able to kind of build on it yourself and morph it into what's going to be best for your clients.
thought of two more things to add. Can I add them?
Oh, of course.
Well, so the other thing is I took the other training when I was like 26 and 27. And like every new training that I did or have done, I always thought that I was going to save the world and everyone was going to start charting and there would be like no more fertility clinics because people would learn so much and everyone would be so inspired by this knowledge that I had learned that I was able to share. Now that I'm no longer in my 20s and I'm a little bit older and I've worked with people a lot more, it's helped me also kind of come at it from this place of like, okay, what will this person absorb? How can I help this person? So my perspective on working with people has changed. And I say that with the utmost love of like sometimes people are gonna eat everything up, like I did with the taking charge of your fertility book the first time I read it. And sometimes people are gonna hear things like 3 or 4 times before they really hear it. And you've reiterated that in the program for me too, but I've been like, I don't understand. I've already told them. And you're like, sometimes I have to hear it again. And the other part of that too was that, like I said, I took that training close to 9 years ago. So I was open to the idea that some things had maybe changed. And I didn't know what they were, but whether that was like more research or like more current stuff, like it sounds like everywhere I go, menopause and perimenopause are all the rage. And I didn't know anything about that at the time. So I just wanted to be like, if I'm going to actually dip my toes back in the water and like step into this, how can I do it? Not from like old information or what was true and current at the time, but like the updated 2024 version.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to know what actually sold me on the class?
Yeah.
I was going to do it anyway, but like what like immediately got me to put my credit card number is you said that you were going to send this if I signed up in time. And I was like, oh, paper, you bet. So that was the official draw. Sorry, I just held up the this really wonderful practitioner book full of like 250 handouts and fell in love. So
Yeah. So what Chloe's talking about is our FAMM practitioner workbook. So we behind the scenes have all of that information, online in digital form, and we always have. So our practitioners always gain access to all of our documents, handouts, templates, and we're always adding to it. We have practitioner protocol checklists, and we have intake forms, and just a lot of stuff that we've developed over the years. My team and I were kind of, thinking of what can we do to really inspire our practitioners, right? Around the time that we were launching the program. And so we decided It's like, oh, well, let's just make it into a book. We're thinking like, oh, it'll be like 50 to 100 pages. Like we had no idea. So we made this thing and it turned out to be legit 250 pages, which was just, I work digitally, right? So I don't need to print everything off all the time. So to see the vastness of what we did create was kind of like, wow, because it's huge. Anyway, so thank you for sharing that as well. Obviously, our practitioners absolutely love that. And that's our wonderful bonus for our practitioners when they sign up prior to our early bird deadline, which, if anyone is curious, is October 11th at this time. But if you're listening in the future, you can always check that out later on. I wanted to go back to one of the things you said, but now I'm forgetting what it was. It was really good, though. What were your two last points again? Because now I got all distracted. You just went through them.
My two last points were I was in my mid-20s when I initially took the training, and now I'm in my mid-30s. So my perspective on working with people now has changed. And my second point was what I learned close to 10 years ago was true 10 years ago, and I was open to what had changed and new information.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely lost my train of thought there. But one of the things that, like, I just want to go back to that shift in perspective, because I think one of the benefits, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback these days because I'm definitely older than I was when I started in this field. So I am turning 42 this year because I keep saying, like, how old am I? Like, how have I been podcasting for 10 years? Like, how have I been charting for like 20 plus years? How have I been teaching for 2 decades? All this stuff. But it is what it is. And I did discover charting at a young age. I was about 18 or 19 when I started, and that was over 20 years ago. And I did start teaching women pretty much right out of the gate because it was part of my own journey of finding it, working with people, and then immediately or being part of a group and being an organizer. And then we took a training together. So it just is what it is. And so I feel like I've gone through all the stages. So I went through the stage of like, everybody needs to know, and we're writing this down. Everybody's through it right now. Like everybody needs to chart their cycles right now. Like, and you know, if you keep acting like that, you're not going to have any friends. So I discovered that pretty quick.
So my husband used to play, well, he still plays in a band, but we've been together for 11 years. And he used to play at this pub every Monday night. So I used to go support him and be at the pub. And I'm a natural gabber. So I'd be talking to whatever people were next to me. And a girl would be like, yeah, I think I've got like this sinus infection coming on. And I'd be like, so what part of your cycle are you at? And so I could turn every conversation into a cycle conversation, which quickly got old for many people.
You've been thinking about it. You want to teach your clients to chart their cycles using fertility awareness, but you're not sure where to start. As a women's health professional, you already know the value of menstrual cycle tracking, but I'm guessing that you're not comfortable interpreting complex charts, weird mucus patterns, abnormal bleeding, or other similar situations. You're passionate about fertility awareness and want to use it in your practice, and that's where FAMM comes in. The next class of FAMM is just around the corner. Registration is now open for the Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. Classes start in October. By the time you finish your FAMM certification, you'll have the skills to confidently teach fertility awareness to your clients, interpret all kinds of complex charting scenarios, and you'll have the step-by-step protocols you need to help your clients improve their hormone and menstrual cycle health. Apply today at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. Transform your practice in 9 months. Again, that's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. Yeah, well, it's so interesting. I mean, I don't know that it was. So I'm probably making it sound like it was way worse than it was, but I can distinctly remember because I was also in university at the time when I was learning all of this stuff, and I volunteered, and I was volunteering at a place where when I was volunteering with somebody, we would be sitting and waiting for someone to walk in. So we would talk all the time. So, by the time I was done that volunteer gig, I had already started making charting workbooks like back in the day, and like everybody had one. All of my closest girlfriends had one. Everybody knows about cervical mucus. So many of my girlfriends, when they were ready to try to conceive, like they didn't need any instructions about when was the correct time. Because I mean, I had just gabbed and gabbed and gabbed and gabbed my whole 20s. But what you find, what my experience was that although they all benefited from this information, not everybody, got into actual charting. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people in my life were enriched with the knowledge, but they didn't necessarily go all the way down the rabbit hole like I did. And they weren't necessarily interested in putting everything in a charting book and charting all the time. They were happy with just being aware of the information and doing their thing. And it's also great. It's also great because it enriched their lives in different ways. And they were able to figure out how to bring it into their lives. And so I was able to see that and to see from that young age that everyone is not going to engage with this information in the same way. And that's actually fine because that's not what it's about. And so if anyone has stalked me on different podcast episodes where I've been interviewed, you've probably heard me talk a lot about that kind of concept where I don't actually think that every single woman should necessarily chart because it's not necessarily the correct thing for everybody. Everyone is actually different. So it's interesting that you share that perspective because that's certainly one of the perspectives that I bring in my mentoring because I've already gone through those phases. And I always use the analogy. It's a terrible analogy, but it fits. Like if anyone has like a brand new puppy and the puppy's yipping around and like running around and, chewing on everybody's pants or whatever, I went through that phase. I was the puppy. Okay. But now I'm like that old dog, and your friends have this like older dog that's sitting there and like the kid's like poking something in its ear and it's just like, and it's not even bothered. Like that's where I'm at now. And it's not because, and that's a terrible analogy because it's not exactly where I'm at, but but what it is, what I mean by that obviously is that I don't get as excited about everything because I see things in a long term as well. So I think that's also a perspective that our practitioners benefit from because I don't get excited about individual charts. It's probably very anticlimactic because I've had individual clients for a year, 2 years sometimes. And so I don't get excited about individual charts because this is a process that we're learning. And each chart adds a layer to our understanding of our clients. It doesn't define the client. Sometimes the one chart is super wonky and strange, but it doesn't actually mean that the client has a serious issue. Sometimes it just means that they were going through something weird or they were learning to chart. So we get to figure that out. So I just wanted to kind of riff on that a little bit because I thought it was super interesting that was one of and it makes perfect sense. And of course you have that presence of mind because you've been working with clients for over a decade.
Yeah. Well, and so the funniest thing now is that my husband has heard me talk about everything for so long. I mean, even when I found it, we were using it for birth control. And I remember telling people like, did you know you could only get pregnant for like a little bit? And people being like, that's not true. And being like, no, it is. But my favorite thing at the time, the conversations have shifted in our friend group a little bit, but my husband I would hear my husband be like, well, is she taking her temperature? Or like, how is she charting? Or like, well, if like the temp rises, then that's the thing. Or if someone, unfortunately would have a miscarriage, he'd be like, you should really go see Chloe because I think she does something with that. Or like, well, they're trying to get pregnant, but they're just using an app. I was like, oh, I didn't realize you were so involved in my career.
Maybe we don't realize how much we talk about it though, because my husband also, it's like, because when we're actually talking about it, I think one of my favorite episodes of the podcast is the one where like I interviewed my husband. It's like oldie but goodie. I'll have to link to this one.
Yeah, please.
I don't know if it's anyone else's favorite. I think it's like my favorite, like the diehards, right? The diehard bands that are just, yeah. So there's been one appearance of my husband on the podcast. And it was funny because I was asking him these questions and he shared his experience. Like by the time we met, I had already taught women charting, not even just done it. So I was like totally like, oh, this is what we're doing and blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, okay. But in his experience, he was kind of like, well, I mean, we're engaged. So if we got pregnant, it would be fine. And I'm thinking, I didn't know that was what you were thinking. I didn't. But of course, because he had never used it before, he had never he'd never done it. So he was kind of just like, okay, whatever you say. But hey, I'm okay if there's an accident because he was kind of waiting for the accident. Until obviously he realized that there was no accidents because it actually worked. But yeah.
Absolutely.
And then it also made me think about the random conversations that are occurring at his workplace. So he'll come home and be like, could you send a book to so-and-so? And I'm like, oh, sure. Because, she was saying that her cycles are regular. And I was like, could it be? And I'm like, he's like, could it be PCOS? And again, I'm like, what is it's the same as you. It's like, okay, I guess you were listening. And I guess I talk
Amazing.
about this a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I love that he's like somehow kind of a funny buffer of like that person doesn't have to take the full step of being evaluated. Someone just sent them a resource that was again like taking away that risk and just making it like a mini bite so they could take their own next step. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm in so deep. So obviously, I mean, training practitioners means you're in deep. So when I wonder now, I'm going to have to, do some episodes where I, reach out to some new listeners or some new followers where you go back to some of those Pill Reality series episodes. Because I mean, if you just discover it, like what I hear, like what I actually do hear from the newer listeners is like, I just discovered you. And then like, there's just so much content. So you can just binge forever. And then there's the books. Like that's a big like learning curve. You know what I mean? Like it's a big like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of information that I didn't know. So I think that it's great. Hopefully, I mean, that's probably is somewhat overwhelming to some extent, depending on the person, but that's what it is. And so I do like to be able to be like, okay, before you get all excited, like maybe just read the book, listen to a couple podcast episodes, right? Like sit with it for a bit because you're going to go through all the motions about it too,
Yeah.
which is a big part of it.
Yeah. And man, thank goodness you're here too. Again, when I was first like Googling short luteal phase to get here, I found Tony Weschler's book, Taking Charge of Your Fertility. But then I was like, oh, do I have to be a master's in public health to do this? Like, do I have to go to nursing school? Like, what is it? So I was so glad that people are sharing more information and you get not the fast track, but like what you actually want to do versus like this side journey to get to where you actually want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is an interesting situation because when I'm speaking to people who have absolutely no idea, like it's really interesting at like parties of people like, what do you do? And it's like, wow, because it's such a big thing. And as soon as I talk about it with anybody, male or female, I get all like, I joke that it's like all the tools fall out of their mouths, right? It's like everything. So if you were to meet me in a social situation randomly, I don't talk about what I do like as a just like, I guess it's me. Like I don't do that. When I'm asked, of course, I'll be honest and share. And I'm not, just to be clear for anyone who's like confused, I'm not hiding it or anything like that. I just don't big up myself all the time and like I just don't do that. I'm just like a normal person if you were to meet me in a social situation, hopefully. So, so anyways, but when it does come up, then within 5 minutes, I get like an earful, all the whatever fertility challenges, menstrual issues, because this is the thing about this topic. Everybody is either dealing with something, whether it's just period stuff, challenges, birth control, fertility challenges are very common. And that comes up all the time. I was trying to cancel like I have Molly Maid and they like come like once a couple every week or like whatever. Like I was literally trying to cancel it because I was like, okay, I'm not going to need it for a while. And there was new management. And I'm like on the phone with the guy who like is the new manager. And he's like, oh, so, why did you cancel? Just wanted to make sure it was okay. And oh, what do you do for a living? And like 45 minutes later, I was sending him a book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love too that people think that there's only one way or like this is their situation and I frequently forget that people also don't love their periods like I do or if you don't know that there's this whole other perspective and it's not either or, but it's like and also here are these other things that are available that you can do. I love that you get to show up and kind of surprise people like that too.
Yeah. Yeah, blowing minds, like one vagina at a time. We're changing the world. Well, I mean,
Please let that be on your tombstone.
one vagina at a time. Yeah, my husband calls me the vagina whisperer.
I love it.
But I'll just leave it at that because he's really funny as well. He makes a lot of jokes. So I'm always like, I can't let you anywhere near my podcast because because of all the jokes. But as we start wrapping up, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One is, I mean, now that you have been through the program, you had your goals, it sounds like you were able to hit a lot of those goals, which I'm thankful for with the program. So share with us kind of what your vision is, what you're hoping to do, what your plans are, anything exciting that you have coming up.
Yeah. In my head now at this moment, what I'd love to do is start like a really basic course of just going over anatomy and physiology for the female body just to because I feel like everyone's like, yeah, I know that. And then every time I teach it, they're like, no way. And I mean, like very wonderful, smart, educated people that would say that they're very in tune and know a lot about their body. So I'd love to start out with this like very easy, digestible, basic anatomy and physiology course. And I think I could make it fun. And then from there, I realize now that I used to try to combine everything together of fertility, birth control, and hormonal health in like very short, like 2 or 3 session courses, and then be like, and good luck. So I realize now that they have to be separate. Like fertility people only care about fertility, birth control people only care about birth control, hormonal health people who are not interested in either of those things pretty much only care about that. And there are 3 different audiences completely. So I'm still kind of sitting with how I want to work with that in the future because I realize, like I said, they're not dependent on each other. So I'm still open.
I love that. And
Oh, sorry, one more thing.
oh,
And what I love about having them as 3 separate avenues now is that the same person might use all 3 of them at some point. Like no one's trying to get pregnant forever. So I see how there's still benefit to making those connections with people so I can be a resource of support as they go through.
yeah, I love that. That is, it touches on a topic that comes up every time that we run the program with all of our practitioners, which is the niching conversation. And it's always tough because fertility awareness work in and of itself is a niche, but when you are in kind of today's world and it's very loud and busy, there are a lot more people talking about it. Even though I still don't think we've hit critical mass, there's still a lot more people talking about it. You're right, because the fertility client is looking for something a bit different. Like from our perspective as educators, a lot of it feels similar because it's the similar information, it's just applied differently. But having worked with fertility clients, birth control clients, and then clients who are not trying to conceive or avoid, but who have health issues, although the material is similar, you do focus on different aspects of it or gear it differently. And you emphasize certain pieces and de-emphasize others. So it doesn't mean that you would never have a conversation with a fertility client about birth control, but it would be de-emphasized. You would talk about it in a different way, potentially at a very different time. So when I'm working with fertility clients, typically I'm bringing that up at the end as a, have you thought about what you'll do? Kind of like as you're wrapping up kind of thing, like, have you thought about what you'll do? And I like to share that information at that stage so that they're thinking about it. Because like you said, there's no one who is going to be trying forever. Eventually, when they successfully conceive, and however many children that they want to have in their family, or if they conceive and then want to have a little break, that's when it comes in. So yes, that's all really interesting. And we've talked about this a lot. So what would you say to the person who is tuning into all of these practitioner episodes because they're kind of thinking about the program and they're kind of stalking a little bit, not calling you out, but just mentioning listening. But what would you say to anybody who's kind of on the fence or who's has some of those worries, even someone who's in a similar situation that you are, like, well, I already took a training of one kind or another, and I'm not sure what this would add to the mix.
Well, it's a 9-month program. And so 2 things really come to mind. On one hand, you absolutely set us up for success. And so the success is on our shoulders with whatever we do on it, but you have provided all of the tools. So no matter how we take that, I think by the end of the training, this is good. This is all you need to know versus like, oh, this is just one step and I need to get, I mean, you can expand in any professional way, but this is a solid course. And the other thing that I was really surprised on was like timing wise, when I signed up, I didn't know if it was the right time. And there had, it's a full year of your, I mean, close to, it's a full 9-month gestation. So it was funny how we started this program in February and then come April, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy with kid stuff right now. Like maybe this wasn't the best time, but it was. And I got it done, everything that I needed to be doing. I was showing up for calls, I think. And then, like summer hits and you're like, I don't have childcare anymore. This is a hard time. But then you get through it. And then school started back up for my children. And I was like, this is a really busy time. But all that to say, life is always busy. So there's never like a better time. This is it. It's going to be okay. And you're so interested in the material that it doesn't matter because like I read self-help books for fun and like marketing and business books for fun. So Like I eat this stuff up anyway. So it's not like someone's forcing me to learn how to fix my car.
I love that. Love that you said that. I'm very similar, Chloe, because I'm always reading. I abuse my Audible subscription. Like the amount of books that I've read, and these days I'm actually not going for volume. These days I'm going for study. So I read the same book because I'm listening to it and I'm busy and I've got, the kids screaming and I'm washing something in the, dishes or whatever while I'm listening or getting ready. So I listen to the same book multiple times to study it. But I really resonate with what you said as well, because I'm the type of person who typically is always reading something, learning something. And so if you're really interested in the subject matter, you raise a very important point. And obviously, I've had a lot of conversations with practitioners, and one of the biggest questions and concern, like, there's no woman like over 20 years old who just like has just free time. Like it's just like sitting around. Like there will never be a month or two in your life where there's just like nothing going on. And especially in my age group, as a 40-year-old, little kids, aging parents, business, lots of things happened in the last 12 months of my life that were not at all convenient whatsoever. But like you said, I mean, you make time, you make space for the things that are important. So I think that's a really important piece of it, because no one in the program just has like no kids, no business, no family, no like no responsibilities, no, like there's just no one who fits that bill. But we do see our practitioners prioritize what's important. And here we are in September as we're recording this. It'll come out in October likely. And you are actually like almost done. So you could have delayed it and waited through, oh, this is a busy time. Oh, it'll be better next year. And then you would have gotten to next year and you still wouldn't have done it.
Absolutely. I could have had 1,000 gremlins at any point in the program be like, oh, what if you don't find anyone to work with? Oh, what if you don't get that in on time? And then you realize like, oh, this is all in my head. And Lisa is so supportive. And so is her team. And she has answered every question and made this all like, she wants you to succeed. I'm talking about you in a weird way, but you want us to succeed too. Like you would like us to graduate this program. So it's only been a well-held space.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying that. We are literally obsessed. So we have a small team, and like, I meet with our coaches, and we like literally sit around and dream up ways to support our practitioners to finish. Because for us, this is obviously, like I always say, like if this was about making money, I would just buy stuff off Alibaba and resell it on Amazon. Like if it was about making money, that's what I would do, right? This is a much deeper vision and goal that I've had since I started this, even since before I started the podcast. But since I started the podcast and started writing the books, initially it was like, I just want women to know about this. And now, having been in this field for, over 2 decades, seeing how the field itself has changed, seeing how the field has really just like exploded. But even though the field has exploded, even though there's way more educators out there, way more women know about it, we still have not made a dent in critical mass. Like it's really humbling if you actually think about what I'm saying to you. Because some of the listeners were probably in like elementary school when I was first learning this stuff, right? Like you couldn't just go online. There was no online, okay? There was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. Like I'm old, okay? There was none of this stuff. There was no smartphones. There was like a library and a spreadsheet. There was like paper that you printed and charted on, and nobody knew about this stuff. And even though we are now at this huge critical mass, there's still so much there's still such a ways to go. So I'm still very hopeful. I don't say that to be negative, but my visions and goals have changed, because now I actually truly believe we already have made a dent, and we will continue to. So now my mission has changed. So now I'm creating an army. And so we want you to graduate, right? We want you to graduate. We want you to get your certification so that you can go out there and literally change the world one vagina at a time.
Yeah. And not to get political, but I'm from the United States, and it kind of seems like this is like reproductive rights and freedom are always on the table. And so if I could do anything to remove some of that fear and to only instead increase body autonomy and knowledge and wisdom. So people felt like they had a little bit more sense of control and power in their own lives. And that I'm so glad that all of your podcasts exist and that we get to be people that are on the field helping.
Mm-hmm. And it makes me think of, like, with Real Food for Fertility. I mean, Lily and I can't speak for her exactly, but I can say that when I think about that book, for example, I think that I always love this. I romanticize this idea. Like when I was doing more group coaching programs, I would always, like, I love all of my clients. So all of my clients are listening. I love you all the same. But I always had this like special place in my heart for like the 20-year-olds, the 20-somethings, the women who are at that young age, who have this amazing opportunity to have a very different experience of menstruation, of reproduction, of birth control. And when you're that age, you have the opportunity, if you learn this information up front, you can make real choices. Now, I'm not trying to like salt the wound, because I also know on the flip side, it's really difficult for women who discover this information sometimes when they're in their 40s. And I think regardless of when you discover it, whether you're somewhere in between and even past, because I've had clients who literally had already went through menopause and then they discovered it. And so they were wanting to learn more about it to kind of capture what they felt they had lost and also be able to impart it on the younger audience. But regardless of when you find it, you can always do something with it, and you can always find ways to make your own life better. But I just think to myself, with that book, there's a lot of women who, if they have this information at a young age, they have the opportunity to potentially never need IVF. Yeah. That's not a guarantee. So please don't send your lawyers at me. But I'm just saying, with this information, we have the ability to significantly improve our cycles and our hormones in a way that is meaningful, scientifically proven, to minimize the risk of other things. It doesn't mean you would not have any struggles, but you could potentially minimize that to a huge degree. So
yeah. And I love the idea of just normalizing the female body in general. And so, yeah, I think all the education that anyone can get at any age is spot on.
I've had clients who've had procedures that they regretted, that they realized afterwards they might not have needed had they just waited a period of time, gathered more information, and taken a different approach. And the surgery is still there as an option. So like waiting is not, unless it's you're bleeding out on the table right now, you could typically wait.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Chloe, this has been just fantastic. I've enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we've meandered in lots of different places. So thanks so much for holding it with me. Please share with us where our audience and listeners can go to find you, where you are in the world specifically, in case anyone can benefit from your work in person. So just all the things.
Yeah, the best place to find me is my website, which is www.chloeshealingarts.com. And I'm trying so hard to get a presence on Instagram, but I love Facebook because I love writing and being a little silly and doing my goofy little drawings. So my Facebook, if you Facebook Chloe Van Lente, you'll find my page, and then it will show up as my business page right there.
Awesome. Well, we will link all the places, and, follow Chloe.
Thank
Help
you.
her build up her socials. And thank you so much for being here. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/544. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Chloe. I've enjoyed these episodes. It's always a great opportunity to go a bit deeper with our FAMM practitioners and talk about more of their story, things that we don't necessarily hear in our sessions, as our sessions tend to be more focused on the charting aspects and, of course, on their client case studies when they're in the midst of their program. One of the themes that has come up with these episodes, especially the episodes with our fertility awareness practitioners, is the theme of our FAMM program and how our content really exceeds the expectations of our practitioners, whether they are fertility awareness practitioners expecting to kind of have their eyes glaze over because they expect that maybe the fertility awareness information will be redundant, or our other practitioners such as our midwives and physical therapists and nutritionists and other modalities, really finding the program itself to be a much deeper dive than they anticipated. So if you were listening to this episode in October of 2024 and you were waiting for the last minute to join us in our next round of FAMM, our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship. The last call has officially arrived, so make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive, that's FAMMLIVE, to apply. And if you're listening to this episode in the future, then still head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive, and we'll have details there about our next class opening. So with that said, I hope you have a wonderful weekend whenever you tune into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting. And that's a wrap. If you're loving the FAMM research series or our FAMM practitioner series, then I know you'll love our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. It's a 9-month immersive experience that will completely transform the way you work with clients, allowing you to not only teach fertility awareness to your clients, but to use the menstrual cycle as a vital sign and diagnostic tool in your women's health practice. Our next class starts on October 22nd, so there's still time for you to reserve your spot. There's no other program like this offered anywhere. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive to apply now. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE.